believe it or not, the government has been sending out a signal into space for 50 or 60 years now, trying to contact life on other planets.
Wow.
We haven't got any signals back, but we don't know how long the signal has to travel, how far it has to travel, for how long it has to travel before life would pick up on it. And then, of course, life on the other planets would have to be tuned into that particular signal, have the equipment to pick up that kind of signal. Who knows what their technology is like. And then they'd have to send a signal back to us. But the government's pretty convinced. They're convinced enough that they're sending out signals to space, which makes you wonder, do they really know about aliens? You know, people claim that the government had Area 54 or something.
51. Or
Area
Roswell.
51, right, for a long, long time, and that they have evidence and proof that there is life on other planets and aliens. And I think that, you know, it would be pretty egocentric for us to believe that there isn't, that we're the only planet with life, right? Well, it is Metaphysical Monday, and being that it is Metaphysical Monday, we are going to explore the world of possible UFOs and life on other planets. We have a woman, she's an investigative journalist. She's been investigating the possible claims of UFOs for years and years and years, and she is now convinced that there are UFOs, that there have been UFO sightings here, and she has physical evidence, is what I'm being told. So we are going to chat with her next. Plus, if you have a UFO sighting story, I'm going to let you share it. And I'm not going to think you're crazy. Well, okay, maybe. If you sound crazy, I'm probably going to think you're crazy. So try to sound as normal as possible when you're telling your UFO stories. It is Metaphysical Monday here on Your Time with Kim.
Who needs a crystal ball when you have guests like these? It's Metaphysical Monday on Your Time with Kim Iverson.
Welcome back to the show. It is Metaphysical Monday here on Your Time with Kim Iverson. We have Leslie Kean with us tonight. She's an investigative journalist, also the author of UFOs. Generals, pilots, and government officials go on the record. She says she has physical evidence that UFOs are for real. Leslie, welcome to the show.
Well, thanks so much for having me.
So let's talk about this journey you've been on. You've spent the last 10 years studying the UFO phenomenon. So let's talk about it.
Yeah, I mean, it was just a long journey that began when I received a military study from France, which dealt with the UFO subject, and all these generals and admirals and high-level people were talking about that UFOs could possibly be extraterrestrial, and had done a lot of studies in very interesting cases. And I just started to think, you know, if there's even a small chance these things are real, it's really important. And I wanted to get to the bottom of that question.
All right. So then, how did you go about your investigation?
Well, I just started, reading a lot, talking to a lot of people. I mean, I did what a journalist does: tried to find the highest level sources that I could find on the subject matter from around the world. Read papers, read government documents, looked at photographs, radar data, studied different cases. And after a while, you just realize, after looking at all the best stuff, it takes a while to learn how to get rid of the stuff that's crazy. We all know, everybody listening, I'm sure, knows that there's a lot of crazy stuff out there when it comes to UFOs.
Yeah, sure. I mean, we turn on the TV, and there's some guy, and, he's like a backwoods guy, and he says, oh, yeah, I saw a UFO. I think so.
And there's, lots of websites with all kinds of crazy information on them, and that's not at all what I'm talking about. I'm talking about actual militaries and governments, officials who have investigated these cases involving aviation, pilots that have had encounters with them, Air Force pilots that have tried to shoot them down, actually objects that have landed on the ground and left marks, and these are all officially investigated. It's not the same thing as some guy outside at night with a six-pack looking up and seeing some lights,
Now, what do you mean they've been officially investigated? By our government?
Well, unfortunately not. Well, our government actually had its own investigative program until 1970 when it closed it down. So we did some investigation back then, but there were a lot of problems with that investigation. The best investigations have been done by other countries. And there are government documents from all over the world that describe the investigations that have taken place. And some of the most extraordinary cases have taken place in other countries. Our government may have been involved to some extent or other, but they're all officially documented. There's lots of data that people can get access to that establish without a doubt that something physical was there. Lots of people saw it. We know what it looked like. There might be radar traces of, about that document its physical existence, and multiple witness cases. Witnesses that know what they're talking about too, like people that are trained aviation experts, pilots, people like that.
So, do you think our government is trying to cover it up? I mean, do you think other governments are more candid with their citizens?
Yeah, I mean, it does seem that other countries, and again, I don't know about every country, but the countries that I've worked with, that they do tend to be more open. And some of these other countries today even have their own government agencies that do nothing but they're UFO agencies. That's all they do is they investigate the phenomenon. It's part of the government structure.
Right.
You know, that would seem just too far out for our country to ever imagine doing. So, yeah, there's definitely more of a stigma over here. There's a lot of ridicule associated with it, and people in Washington are terrified of politicians of having any association with the subject, even if they personally take it very seriously, which many of them do.
Right.
I think you're right. I think and I think the book shows that, because I do go, I have chapters written by people from other countries that there really is a difference between our country and other countries.
Interesting. I mean, do you believe like in Area 51 and...
Well, I mean, Area 51 exists, but I don't know that much about it. I sort of doubt that there are UFOs stored there. I've never, it's sort of a mythology around Area 51, but right. I haven't spent a lot of time digging into that. I guess there's a new book out about it, but, I just don't know that much about it.
Right. Do you think that our government has been just kind of, you say that they shut down the investigations in the 70s. I mean, do you think that maybe our government was still continuing to investigate, but they didn't want to talk about it?
Absolutely right, Kim, because, and in fact, in the book, I bring forward a memo. There was an actual classified document that was written up within our government about 2 months before they officially closed down the investigation. And what the document said was, the investigations are going to continue, that any cases that have national security implications are going to be maintained and studied and dealt with through other channels rather than Project Blue Book, which was our... So they were actually putting in black and white that they were going to continue to investigate this while they told the public that they had no more interest in UFOs.
Yeah.
And it's all there in the documents.
What are the implications of UFOs existing? What's the problem? Why can't they just talk about it?
Well, that's a great question too, and I think there's a lot of people have thought a lot of opinions about that, because we don't know for sure. But some people think that maybe they're afraid there would be panic, or that I think one of the smartest answers to that might be, and again we don't know, is that perhaps they don't want to acknowledge the existence of something that's completely out of their control. I mean, not so much because it's frightening, but just because these are objects that come and go at will, that are much more powerful than we are, that have incredible technology that we don't have.
Right. Like they're obviously a lot smarter.
Over them.
Yeah, they're obviously a lot smarter at this point. I mean, if they can build technology to get themselves from one planet to another, that's something we can't do. I mean, we could get ourselves to Mars, I guess, but...
Yeah, and indeed they are from other planets. I mean, we don't even really know that. It's certainly a good, it's certainly a good hypothesis to assume,
Sure.
We don't know for sure, but the point is, I don't think the American government wants to think of itself as supreme in the world, wants to stand up and say, hey, there are all these things flying around that we have absolutely no control of. We don't know what they're going to do next.
What do you mean they might come from other planets? Where else would they come from?
Well, I mean, I think that, I think we're all very clear in the book, and the officials that I've worked with at these high levels, including the generals that are in the title and have written chapters for the book, I mean, they're very careful about assuming that they're from other planets. Just because we don't know, we don't have a craft, we don't have something that really proves it. Now, I think that most of these gentlemen, and these are people I'm talking about at high levels who have been very involved with this, would believe that is the best. They call it the extraterrestrial hypothesis.
Uh-huh.
But they still leave it at the level of a hypothesis, a theory, an unproven something that's very likely, but not absolutely solidly proven. So they don't like to assume that they're from other planets, but it's certainly a good possibility, of course.
So they could come from maybe a certain, like countries are building these machines.
Yeah, that's very unlikely, though. I mean, it seems like it's either got to be some kind of extraterrestrial thing from some other planet, or maybe some kind of interdimensional. If there's some way of moving between dimensions.
Sure, yeah.
Craft, or some way of materializing from some place to another. I mean, who knows? I mean, but it just does not seem to be that they can all be explained away by just some country doing, secret experiments with technology. That's just doesn't work.
We just don't have that kind of technology.
Something that which is outside our human realm.
Huh.
And to me, that's so fascinating about it, because I don't know what it is.
Right, yeah, and it is a good hypothesis also that could come from an some sort of interdimensional type of, travel, or
some people have proposed time travel also.
Or time travel, that would be
future time travelers.
Interesting.
I can't really wrap my head around that.
Right.
But it seems to me the most likely thing is the extraterrestrial hypothesis. But again, we just have to realize that we don't know yet, and we've got to get our scientists more involved so that they can really figure it out.
Very interesting. Well, we're going to take a little break here. We have Leslie Kean with us. She's an investigator investigative journalist, also the author of UFOs, Generals, Pilots, and Government Officials Go on the Record. The website is UFOsontherecord.com. When we come back, we're going to find out exactly what the physical evidence is, what the findings are, see if the stories all match up. What do these things look like? We're going to find out next. Stick around. It's Your Time with Kim Iverson.
Find Kim on Twitter. Twitter.com/girlfriendkim.
We're chatting with Leslie Kean tonight for Metaphysical Monday. She's an investigative journalist, the author of UFOs, Generals, Pilots, and Government Officials Go on the Record. So, Leslie, you say that you are convinced now that there are UFOs, unidentified flying objects. You don't know exactly where they're coming from. You think the most likely is from outer space, basically from other worlds. So tell us, what is this? You say that there's physical evidence that can't be denied. What's the physical evidence?
Okay, well, there's a whole range of physical evidence, and one of the important ones is radar. When you have multiple witnesses looking at something, and radar picks it up at the same time in which they're describing the movements, it's also picked up on radar. That sort of physical documentation that the thing was actually there. There are also some very important photographs that have been time tested. These are in the book, by the way. I've selected the best photographs and the most authentic photographs that we have of UFOs, and they're powerful evidence. But I think one of the more fascinating bits of physical evidence is when the objects actually land on the ground. And there have been cases where they've landed, and you can see the imprints from the 3 legs that have come down when they landed. This happened in the UK in 1980. Mm-hmm. There was all kinds of radiation around the area where they landed. You could see there was a tree canopy right above the landing site. You could see where the object came down and actually broke through the tree canopy to come down. And there were marks on the trunks of the trees around it. Another case in France, an object landed, and the plants around it were all desiccated, and as if the heat or some kind of radiation from the object really disturbed them. So this is something very tangible that scientists can take into the lab and study.
Right.
And they can say, what happened to these plants? And by doing that, they can discern, well, what kind of radiation was present and how could this have happened? And you learn something about the object. But when it's on the ground and making circles on the ground when it lands or whatever it's doing, that's pretty powerful evidence.
Interesting. What do they look like? Are they flying saucers?
Well, there's so many varieties of UFOs, but I would say, most of the ones, if you want to narrow it down, are disc shape. I guess you call them flying saucers. Disc shape objects, or elliptoid kind of objects. Triangles and deltas. Those are triangle objects are seen a lot, and the sort of delta shape ones, which are the ones that were seen over Phoenix, Arizona, in 1997. But there's a lot of variety of different shapes and sizes, which to me is one of the more mysterious elements of the whole thing.
Right.
There's so many different types.
What about abductions?
The most common ones are the discs and the triangles, I would say.
Okay. What about abductions? Do you believe in those?
I think that I think there's a whole area there that's really worthy of study. I'm not an expert on it. I don't know that much about it, but I respect there's a number of really serious investigators that have looked into it, and I certainly respect the work they're doing, and I think it's not, I wouldn't write it off.
Yeah,
but it's certainly not something that I'm qualified to speak about.
Oh, well, let's talk about your book, UFOs, Generals, Pilots, and Government Officials Go on the Record. So you say that you did not write a lot of this book, that you had other people write segments?
Exactly. I invited, I wanted to get the best sources in the world, the highest level people I could. And these are people that many of them who I've known for years. So, we developed a relationship of trust. I thought, rather than me quoting what General so-and-so has to say about a UFO case that he's investigated, I'm going to ask him to write his own chapter for the book. Then the reader gets to hear directly from the general in the general's own words. And every chapter that they wrote has a certain quality, a personal quality. Mm-hmm. Some of them are joking, some of them are serious. There's one chapter written by a pilot who was actually attempting to shoot down a UFO, describes how frightened he was. I know what it felt like, what he was thinking at the time, how close he got. Nobody can tell that story like the person themselves.
Right. Right.
And, I had a lot of work to do. It wasn't just like I had to work very hard with each one of these guys to help them to write their pieces. They're not writers. So it wasn't like I just sat back and only wrote half a book.
Yeah.
Some of them don't even speak English, so there's a lot involved in getting their chapters together, but I think it makes an absolutely huge difference to have people be able to read their own words.
Yeah, very interesting. I really like that. Thank you so much for joining us, Leslie. This has been very interesting. I would like to read the book. So Leslie Kean, she is an investigative journalist, the author of UFOs, Generals, Pilots, and Government Officials Go on the Record. The book is now out on paperback, which you could grab at our website, UFOsontherecord.com.